And we're back with a quick tutorial on Starsector, and this one is going to be all about from the mid-game to the late game. Now, the earlier tutorial I did about 6 months ago, that one still pretty much holds true. So there would be a few minor changes I make. I'd swap out the Sunderers for these new Eradicator ships. They're, well, much better for what we're trying to do, and we can now actually use one of these Atlas ships for our cargo containers. The first thing, though, I would recommend you do is actually spend some story points. Now, I stored up my story points way too much and did not use them. I sort of hoarded them. And one thing I can tell you is, these two survey ships, you're going to use them a lot, or these salvage gantries. They're just incredibly efficient. If you have one of them, it'll increase the amount of fuel and resources you get out of every fight or everything you salvage by 25%. Stick in two of them and it increases that up to 44. You get a case of diminishing returns, though. Going up to a third one will only bring you up to 55, so I think 2 is about the perfect level. However, they're not perfect, and what you can do is you can build in the surveying equipment. Surveying equipment means when you're surveying planets, which you will probably do a lot of, it will reduce the cost. I also like to stick in high-resolution sensors. By sticking this in, you've got a ship that's going to be with you from like the middle of the game to the end. It's going to help your sensor levels, it's going to help you with surveying stuff, it's going to help you with your salvage. As well as that I stick in insulated engine assemblies and solar shielding. Now, the reason I put in those is it decreases your sensor profile to about 60, which puts you well below the Eradicators. The Eradicators come in at 90, so long as you're coming in below that, you're not going to be messing with their sensor profile. Otherwise, these things are going to cause more of a sensor blip than our cruisers, so this thing sort of helps out. And the solar shielding means if we get struck by solar storms, doesn't really bother this ship at all. Otherwise, if you're not willing to spend the story points, surveying equipment and solar shielding is perfectly fine. But my advice, spend a couple of story points. These ships will be with you the whole game long. You're going to keep them in your fleet forever, so you might as well get your money's worth out of them. The reason I changed my mind on the Atlas is, if you're willing to spend a few story points, this can become a very, very useful ship to you. This one we're actually going to stick in militarized subsystems. And this may seem a little bit crazy, but hear me out here. The sensor profile and sensor strength of your fleet is really determined by the 5 biggest ships. 5 biggest ships determine how much sensor strength you have, and the 5 biggest ships also determine your sensor profile. And if you don't have militarized subsystems on this ship, this thing has a sensor profile of 300. To put it in perspective, the big combat ships you're bringing with us, they've got a sensor profile of 90. This just makes you much, much more visible. So I do like keeping those in there. At the same time, it also increases your sensor strength from 75 to 150, meaning you've got a ship that can actually sense stuff from a lot further away. This actually adds to your fleet, and it's quite nice, while also giving you massive cargo bays. So for that reason, if you're willing to invest a few points in this actually becomes a rather useful ship that's not that much of a detriment to your sensor strength or your sensor profile. Also, you will need cargo storage for the entire playthrough, so you're probably going to end up getting a second one of these later anyway. My advice, invest the points, and you'll be reaping dividends for the whole game. When it comes to the fuel tanker, pretty much the same thing here. For your fuel tanker, I treat it pretty much like one of these salvage ships. The reason being, you're going to have it with you for the whole playthrough, and it's the same size and class. Insulated engine assembly, solar shielding, and auxiliary fuel tanks. You could put on an extra high-resolution sensors, but it's only going to take you from about 200 sensor strength bonus to 229 for a third one, so it's not really necessary. If you wanted to, you could remove one of the high-resolution sensors here and put it on your fuel tank to start, because you're probably going to have a fuel tank and one salvage gantry first. So whichever you prefer, just keep about 2 high-resolution sensors in your support ships, and it's pretty nice. It's a pity you can't actually squeeze one on here, but we need solar shielding on everything. The reason being, when you start passing through solar storms, you're not going to want to slow down. That just makes the game take so much longer. More about that later. As for combat ships, Eradicators, they are absolutely excellent ships, just for cost efficiency-wise and longevity. You do not need to invest points into these to make an effective build. 4 Vulcan cannons takes care of pretty much all missiles and fighters. Then you've got 2 heavy maulers. I went originally with 2 hypervelocity drivers, but the heavy maulers turned out to be better. The reason being, you actually have plenty of anti-shield in terms of this hypervelocity driver and the 3 railguns mounted up front. They do a pretty good number on the shields for anything that gets close. Then the heavy maulers can basically shred the armor afterwards. This makes them quite effective. Integrated targeting unit, solar shielding, heavy armor. Now you will notice we're putting solar shielding on everything. This is just to make your game more pleasant to play. It just makes dealing with solar storms less of a hassle. 6 of these are about the perfect amount. And then you've got yourself your cargo storage, your fuel storage, and your 2 salvage gantries. This is about the perfect fleet to start going and doing some exploration with. But before we cover that, we should probably get into, well, spoiler territory. Now, this next bit is going to be a bit of a spoiler, but it's a very, very strong suggestion. So if you don't want to see the spoiler, just skip to here. you see there is a mission chain that you can pick up at Galatea. You get it by going to the Galatea Academy station and making friends with the provost there. You do missions for their lackey until you get their happiness up to level 50, and then they will give you the first quest in the chain. You will get a mission labelled Ask About Tritachyon Blacksite Extraction Mission. This is a quest chain that's 5 quests long, and at the end of it, you will get to activate the gates. As in, these gates that you find lying around the map, you can now go and use them to transport yourself instantaneously from one gate to any other gate anywhere on the map, so long as you have scanned that gate. There's the little blue and black dots there, they're gates that are on the map, and you can transport instantly between any two. This makes getting around the map so much more convenient and less time consuming. I would heavily recommend doing this quest chain. In fact, it can be done from the start of the game, directly out of the tutorial area, so long as you're willing to spend a few story points, just to avoid some of the fights that you can potentially end up in. It can be done in an entirely pacifist manner, and at the end of it, it opens up the galaxy for you in a way that it just really should be the first thing you do. Well, exploring the Rim for goodies, there's 2 usual things you're going to encounter out here. One is the automated defenses on Domain Era survey ships. These things are really handy. They're like loot pinatas. You beat them up and you get a bunch of resources out of it, including fuel and supplies. It makes it just so much easier to continue. Yeah, whatever. We'll just send in 5 of these guys and we'll just let them loose. The reason being, they're incredibly tough and they do an awful lot of damage. And they're just going to mincemeat a lot of these. You don't even have to do anything. You just let your ships loose. I mean, if you want to get involved in the combat, you can, though honestly, I'm just here to kill them as quickly as possible, take their stuff and move on. When I'm exploring, I want to explore quick. Picking through the wreckage, as you can see, you get supplies, you get fuel, you get a bunch of other stuff. Take the lot. Then what you want to do, begin your salvage operation as well to take the rest of the stuff, confirm continue, and then you get to do one final salvage as well. And remember, you're getting bonuses for all of this, so this is a good way to keep you sustained out here. Fighting out on the Rim, you're basically going around hitting up all of those probes, and those probes will allow you to keep exploring out here for even longer. In fact, it's completely self-sustaining, I found, with a good ship build, and you can literally stay out here just surviving off the land, so to speak. There is, however, some trickier problems you might face. Let's go over here. There is, yes, a Domain Era Cryosleeper. These things are a little bit tougher, and it's the reason we bring so many ships. This thing is not easy. Alright, and you know what? We'll just do another automated fight. We're not even going to try and bring in our ship. We're just going to do this completely with the ships we started with. What we're going to do is form a little line, get them to hold it, and get them to shoot the bejesus out of it. Now, I'm going to go through... Oh, you know what? Let's just let this play out. And there you go. That's about the toughest you're going to face out here, so long as you stay away from the Remnant, and even then we were still able to recover that ship without issue. Pick through the wreckage, take it all. Great stuff. Unfortunately, you don't get much else but that. In fact, killing that is not usually worth the effort, but if you really want to, you definitely have enough ships to do it. And one thing to notice, I haven't gone over the skills here. The skill tree's changed since the last tutorial, but my advice, navigation is still really powerful. Bulk transport is always useful. The reason it's so useful now, though, is increases the burn level of all non-militarized civilian-grade ships by 2. That's a big deal. It makes civilian ships much, much faster. If you install militarized systems now, it actually slows those ships down because they'll only get a +1 boost from the militarized subsystems. Anyway, salvaging, that's, well, a no-brainer as well. Containment procedures, this actually reduces fuel consumption. Makeshift equipment reduces resource consumption for maintenance. And hull restoration allows you to remove demods and basically just have better ships. And you're more likely to be able to recover your ships if they do get destroyed. This is just... I ended up using these for pretty much the entire bulk of the game because they are quite useful. This next bit we're about to cover, okay, let's just say this is going to sound a little bit weird. I'm going to recommend you make changes to the base game just so that it makes it easier for you to play it. The reason being time. When you're playing this game, you're going to spend a lot of time doing this. Yep, and that's me holding down the shift key. When you hold down the shift key, it speeds up time, and it means time is moving twice as fast. And there we go. Yep, and we are going all the way back home, which is to Corvus. Let's see how long that takes. We'll just fast forward it, but let's see what it takes in real time to do that. .1.5 minutes, or 90 seconds. However, you have to realize this is the size of the galaxy, and you're probably going to want to explore a large number of the planets. At least everything in this section here, you're going to want to explore to see if it's decent for colonization, and everything in this section up here. These two sections here appear to be the best place to find colonizable worlds, because if you try and explore over here, you won't find anything decent in these sections. You'll only find it in the far rightmost section over here, which is usually too far away to colonize. Same over this section. So these are the two areas here. You're probably going to have to look at every planet. It takes a really, really long time. We're just covering the hyperspeed journey, but once you're inside the systems, you then have to travel between planets and do all the scanning to try and find good ones. It's really, really... Well, okay, it killed the game a little bit for me until I found a solution. Go and find your Starsector shortcut, open the file location, go into Starsector core, go into data, go into config, and go into settings. Now, I'll link this in the description if you need to find it. And this will open this up. This is an INI file pretty much. It controls a lot of the stuff contained in the game. What we want to do is we want to do a quick search here for campaign speed multiplier. If we do a look for this, or just campaign speed should be enough. It'll show you that the multiplier value when you hold down the shift key while playing the game is 2. I upped that to 5. And this saved the game from being a little bit of a grind at times to making it just so much more pleasant to play. Now let's do that same journey home, but this time we're going to do it at by 5 speed. And it makes such a difference. It turns the game from what should have been, well, for me personally, I found it changed the game for the better. If you don't want to do this, you don't have to. It's not 100% necessary. It's just if you find that the exploration side of the game is maybe dragging a little bit more than you like, you can maybe crank that speed up a little bit. I found 5 was the perfect medium for me. Anyway, the only other thing I would recommend you change is probably the speed for combat as well. Unfortunately, the combat speed in the game is, well, a little lackluster. Again, this is not 100% necessary, but I did find that this drastically improved my enjoyment of the game, so if you want to, and you're not familiar with this sort of thing before, you want to Google Starsector speed mod, it'll bring you to this forum page. Then you just click on download the speed up thing. That will give you this downloaded file, which is a zip file. If you don't know how zip file works, oh wow, yeah, that could be a problem. Anyway, you're going to open up and there's a folder in here called Speed Up. What do you do with that folder? Go back to our good friend the Starsector shortcut, open file location, and find the mods folder. And then you just copy the Speed Up folder in there. This is how mods used to be done back in the day. This is one of the reasons Steam is so popular. It got all that mods and just built it into the system, and you didn't have to go through all this stuff. This is how all the mods were done, I swear. You just had to copy a folder somewhere or copy a file somewhere to make a mod work. It was crazy. Anyway, once the file is in there, you're just going to want to open the game, and then you want to go into the mod section. I have 2 mods currently running at the moment, Detailed Combat Results and Speed Up. So Speed Up is the one that actually improves combat speed, and Detailed Combat Results is just, you know what, that's not necessary. Anyway, even with that installed, it doesn't actually do anything unless you press some other buttons. So you can install this and never use it, unless there's maybe a situation where you think it might be beneficial. For example, maybe the fight is a foregone conclusion because you're going up against some automated defenses and you think it would be faster if you just say hit Control and Caps Lock, doubling the speed. I made a little bit of a modification to the files myself, and now when I hold down the middle mouse button instead of doubling combat speed, it triples it. And this just speeds up taking care of these little fights that you don't really care about. I mean, I could get in my ship and go fight them myself, but hell, why bother? Just speed up the flight and let these guys take care of it. Also, the end of fights where you have to run down some ships, or if you're bringing in capital ships that are really slow, it just saves you so much time and effort. Now, I know talking about mods and changing the game speeds and stuff like that, it's not a normal thing to have in a tutorial. It's just I found this improved my enjoyment of the game so much, I felt like I couldn't leave it out without sort of lying about how I played the game. If you're happy at the speeds it runs at, go for it. It's a single-player game at the end of the day. Do what you're going to do. Now, this map here, I explored most of the outside regions, and there's a thing down here, exploration. This is a good thing to turn on. It will put these little brackets beside planets. Those little brackets tell you that, hey, I have never visited there before. If there's an X in it, that means I have visited there and I have explored every planet. And if there's a question mark symbol, that means I've been there, but I haven't surveyed every planet. Then, once you've surveyed what you think is, well, most of the planets that you're going to need, preferably all the ones down here and all the ones up here. This sort of area is where you're probably going to find the ones you colonize. What you're going to want to do is go into Intel, go into Planets. You're going to want to select Planets and Stations and Unclaimed. Unclaimed just means no one has a claim on the planet. If you go to Uninhabited, it's going to include worlds that other sides consider theirs and would bomb you if you tried to take it, so make sure it's unclaimed. Now, at the same time, when I did this, I've positioned our character right in the center of the core worlds. This way, we're going to get a ranged distance. So we can say, give me distance from me, and then it's going to list the planets by that. This is a very nice way of figuring out what planets you want to colonize. Now, I got really lucky in this, and I got probably an almost perfect start right 2 light years away, so I didn't use this because this felt like it would have been cheating. But what we have here is one thing you'd always be looking for in your starting system. More than one planet, and it's got to have farmland. At least basic farmland. This one's got a +2 farming bonus. It also comes with organics, and it's only got a hazard rating of 125. A hazard rating of 75 would make this an absolute perfect planet, but you can't get everything. At the same time, it also comes with a gas giant that we can get volatiles out of, which allows us to produce fuel, and it also comes with extreme heat, which allows us to get a bonus to our defensive fleets. More on that later. We've also got a planet with no atmosphere, which allows us to put in a whole industrial sector, even if the hazard rating is a little bit high. Hazard rating basically increases the amount of money it costs to run the planet, while at the same time making it harder to grow the planet. So lower hazard ratings is better, and having a gas giant with 150% hazard rating and no high gravity malice is actually kind of beautiful. Anyway, assuming this doesn't exist, because honestly this was incredibly lucky, map seed in the description, you're going to have to go down through here and find yourself a planet that's got organics on it. Or, sorry, farmland. The system I ended up settling on was this one for the reasons I'll list. 1, it had adequate farmland, which was at least good enough. 2, it didn't have any transplutonic ore or volatiles on that. You see, there's these soil nanoants you can get that can improve your farmland by 2. I didn't find them, but if you do find them, they won't work on a planet that has transplutonic ore or volatiles on it. It's always nice to settle a food planet that doesn't have either of those, so you can use soil nanites if you find them out there, or you get them later in the game. At the same time, it still has transplutonic ore right here. It also has ore, regular ore, right here, both inside the same system. You can see all of these come inside the same 4 planetary system. So that gives us organics, regular ore, transplutonic ore. The only thing we're missing in this system is volatiles. Now, you can get by without 1. It's just, it would be preferable if there had been a gas giant. At the same time, one of our worlds has extreme heat on it, which is necessary for our security. And that's sort of what you're looking for. Multiple planets, the 4 different types of resources that you're actually going to need the raw versions of, and the hazard ratings are not too bad. 100, 150, 200 for the extreme heat, and 175 for here. This just turned out to be about right. Now let's go over the items you're going to want to install in them. Learning from my mistakes, the first thing you want to do when you set up on a planet is immediately activate hazard pay. This increases your growth rate. You'll see here that the growth is negative unless you actually pay them a lot of money. All early starting colonies are going to be a money pit until they hit about size 4 or size 5 to size 6. Colonies max out at about size 6. So here it's at colony size 3, and every month this will go up by about, 4% until it maxes out. Once it maxes out, the colony will grow in size, and we'll be able to add in 1 extra industry to generate us more money, plus the extra population will cause us more money, plus the extra population will mean our mines will produce 1 more extra of each resource. Having more population, vitally important. So another good thing to do is activate Freeport. Freeport also increases your population growth, and, well, it's going to do bad things to your money and your stability. So what you're going to do is you're going to pour money into these colonies like you wouldn't believe. First thing you're going to want to do is increase the stability and max that out. So to do that, you're going to want to put in ground defenses, because ground defenses will increase your stability. Then you want to get the patrol HQ and, where is it? No, wait, no, spaceport. We were going to want to upgrade the spaceport to a megaport, which will increase our accessibility bonus and our population growth. Increasing accessibility also increases population growth. So yeah, also increases money. Another thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to install an orbital station. I usually just go with high tech, but this also increases stability. And once that's built, you can upgrade it twice more to increase your stability by a further 2 points, giving you +3 stability out of this building. And yes, it costs an absolute fortune. I think it's like 1.75 million to get this thing all the way maxed out. My point being, colonies are a money sink, and they will be for quite a while until they max it in population. However, they will not be a money pit forever. Now, let's just have a quick look at why we picked everything we did by going straight to the end to see how this all works out. This place is pulling in about 220,000 credits a month, which goes straight into our bank account, which is very nice. However, that was because of all the planning done at the start. Now, ignore the alpha cores and all the AI stuff going on for now. We're just going to look at basic farming. Farming is the simplest one to look at because it only has 1 demand and 1 product. It demands some heavy machinery, and it produces food. That's it. Now, if we go up here and we click on food, this will actually show us the entire market. This is a list of all the planets that exist. These are all inside the core worlds, basically. And these are all food producers. This is the global pie, 253,000 credits. We have 17% of the market based on how much food we're producing and how accessible our planet is, which is generating us 64 grand. That's a decent chunk of money, but that's not why everyone will say get food, get food, get food. You see, you could go with light industry. Now, light industry doesn't produce food. Instead, it produces luxury goods. It also produces domestic goods, and it also produces drugs. All of these combined will actually pull in slightly more money than the food. The reason we go with food is if you produce the resources that feed into your business itself, it's cheaper. Let me just sort of go around on that one. For example, this here is our population and infrastructure. This is all to do with basically people. This is just it's how your colony exists. But down under demands and effects, you'll see food. Food is a demand of every single colony you are going to have. And that affects how much this colony costs to run. So right now, our monthly upkeep is $2,059. If we were to say shut down this, our upkeep has gone up to $2,160. It's not a huge increase, but that increase has happened to all our planets. Every single planet we've got is now not able to get food from here. They have to buy their food off the open market, which has increased their monthly upkeep. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that everything that is required by all of your industries is produced by you. That reduces your monthly upkeep, which means all the profits you make get greater and greater. For example, Edge-Free here does mining. It produces the raw ore and the raw transplutonic ore. It requires, however, heavy machinery and drugs to function. Now, the drugs you saw were produced by our other planet. But hopping over to our more industrial planet, we can see that we've got a refining setup here, and you can see the demands that are required there. It wants heavy machinery, raw ore, and raw transplutonic ore. In exchange, you get refined metal and refined transplutonics. Perfect. That's great. We've basically got all of our supplies coming in, except for that heavy machinery. Where are we getting that from? Well, if you go to your orbital works requires refined metal and refined transplutonics, which we are producing in the refining section. And it produces the heavy machinery necessary to be fed back into the refining so that the refining has cheaper upkeep, which is great. It also gives us supplies, heavy weapons, and ship components, all of which are required by our megaport. Well, our megaport requires the supplies and the ship components, but it also requires fuel. The fuel is produced by our fuel production down here, which requires heavy machinery, which is produced by our orbital works. It also requires volatiles. That's the only thing in the entire chain we don't produce in-house. So everything else we produce, which reduces the cost of running all these businesses, which amplifies our profit margins. The thing is, there's sort of a case of diminishing returns, though. For example, we've pretty much cornered the market on heavy armament. So we're pulling in, the pot is 68 grand. We're pulling in 34 grand of that. Of the global market, we are just crushing it when it comes to that, when it comes to heavy machinery. Building more heavy industry would not really help that much. We get slightly more of the pie, but there's sort of a case of diminishing returns as you go along. But by putting all 4 of these planets in one area, all of the patrols that we create, they protect each other. So all of our patrol HQs are producing, there's an Empire Patrol, Empire Patrol, Empire Patrol, Empire Patrol, fast pickets for running down harassing units. This is to prevent any pirates from harassing you. These things will just dogpile them and murder the lot. If you can keep everything in one system and get all your supplies in one system, you don't have to worry about piracy interfering with it because you'll just have so many fleets running around. That's why everyone tries to put it in one system. Now, one final thing. I am using a whole bunch of AI cores. I would advise you do not do that early on. The problem is this brings a whole load of complications that you probably won't be ready for, which brings us neatly to combat. When you start getting into the mid to late game combat, you're really going to want to start investing into your captains. Captains can turn a good ship into an amazing ship with some of their abilities. For example, this one here is piloting a capital ship, and with helmsmanship, it increases its maneuverability and top speed. Target analysis means it does 10% more damage to destroyers, 15% more to cruisers, and 20% more to capital ships. That's just a straight-up damage boost right there. Ballistic mastery means all the ballistic weapons do 10% more damage and have more range. Missile specialization is incredible for anything with missiles because it doubles the amount of missiles on a ship. So if a ship starts off with 10 missiles, now starts with 20, and the missiles have more hit points, making them harder to shoot down. There's a lot of really good skills you can assign to captains. Now, one thing actually, let's just demonstrate something here. We'll dismiss one of these captains so you can see how you go about it. You're going to want to go to a station. Any station is good. Open the comm directory, and occasionally you'll see officers for hire. Grab them, go, depends what can you do, and you'll see it tells you what their combat skills are and what their personality is. Both of these are very important, but we would like target analysis on our officers, so we would definitely be ordering them, and study's a good one. So we'd offer to hire. It only costs about 2,000 credits. It's very little at this point of the game. And then once you go back into your fleet, you can go in here and check out your captain. Now, the thing is, the first thing you want to do is mentor them. This costs you a story point, but it grants you a 100% bonus experience, as in you're going to get an extra million bonus experience out of this, assuming you can grind out that experience in some way. And in exchange, you get to change their mood one way or the other. You can make them either cautious or aggressive. And if they're aggressive, you could either make them steady or reckless. It's just a nice little touch you can do here. But this, when we do that, this means anytime they level up, they won't gain a new ability automatically. We will have to come in here and assign them out one, and we get to choose which abilities to give them. It will be picked from a list. It's not perfect. You might have to be forced between a bunch of stats you don't want, but it does mean you can custom build them how you like. The captains, I build them customly for each ship. This is a long-range ship that's very tough. It basically sits back, keeps plinking away at people. If anyone gets too close, it backs off. It's got lots of heavy armor, and it can take quite a pounding as well as dish it out. Now, let's just have a quick look at the captain. Now, the captain here has target analysis. Just it's a straight-up damage bonus to anything it shoots. Also, ballistic mastery increases the range and more damage. Wait a minute. Gunnery implants. Increased range, plus reduces recoil, a little bit of target accuracy, good stuff. And finally, polarized armor. It basically reduces the amount of damage it takes when people get through the armor and past the shields. And there will be one final one we stick on top of that, which will be... yes, impact mitigation when that comes up to their next level. That also reduces the amount of damage they take to their armor, weapons, and engine, which is just a good survivability trait. And then the final one is system expertise. This one's a bit odd, but it works with the ship quite well. It basically, if a system has charges of some sort, this helps. So the main one we're looking at there is if the system has a cooldown, minus 33% to the cooldown. In this instance, let's just get rid of the captain for a second and run a quick simulation. What this ship has access to is an autoloader. It's like an ammo feeder for this ship. So what happens is, if you look down there in the bottom left, you'll see accelerated ammo feeder. And that's to do with this gun on the front of it. Well, any gun, actually, any ballistic weapon. It speeds up its ability to shoot. So if we hit F to activate it, you see it's active, and now our rate of fire goes up as the guns start to fire more frequently. This is good. Then it runs out. And you'll see that bar going down. That's it charging up to do the next run. So it's thinking about it, it's thinking about it, it's thinking about it, and finally we're ready for the next one, and then we can finally do another blap. However, if we stick that captain back on, start shooting, come on. Then we hit F to speed it up. And then as you can see, okay, the bar goes down as normal, but then the recharge rate is 33% faster, meaning we can utilize that 33% more, and that's basically a damage buff. It gets an auto-fire increase. As well as that, since most ships dip in and out, when ships dip out, this thing... Actually, let's just put AAI on here, and you can have a see of you can watch them actually using it. Currently, it's active. It activated it itself, and it will just run down the enemy ship, and every time it gets a chance to use it again, okay, it's ready. Well, it turns out that was a really bad ship to demonstrate on. We'd have to chase it around for hours. Anyway, point being, very good all-round ship for just doing a little bit of plinking away at distance. Only problem is it's not a good finisher. As you've seen there, it can't run stuff down. The whole point of this ship is that ships get in range of it, and by the time they get close enough to shoot, usually they're starting to overflux and have to retreat, and then it takes them a long time to get out of the engagement range because of their long range. Plus, it's got 4 Vulcan cannons to help out shoot out. Everything on this is a ballistic weapon. Also, do remember, you don't need to fill every hardpoint. We don't put any missiles in here because... well, we can't support the flux on all the weapons we've got already. If we put in even cheap missiles there, it's just going to eat more into our sustained damage. These ships are slightly different, but these ones are the ones you start adding in when you want finishers. They have Hurricane Merv launchers and Squall LMRS. These are just basically long-range missile platforms that annihilate stuff before they can get out of range. I think the simplest thing to do before I go through this one is show you everything in action so you can get an idea of what everything is doing and why we pick the stats that we're going to be putting on these captains. This is a 286 grand bounty. These are one of the ones you're going to be starting to hit into. Like, you probably start on stuff a little bit softer than this. These heavy onslaughts and legions, they're a little bit more difficult. They're the higher difficulty level for this type of fleet design. But let's go grab them. All right, here they come. Now, our strength is basically long-range combat. As well as that, you notice here, we have 173 deployment points. You will notice that if you don't have a lot of high-level captains, you won't be able to get 180 deployment points. You'll have to wait until you're in battle to get the rest. But that's fine. We'll grab a few of these, and we'll start deploying at the troops. And we'll stick in a few of the missile frigates as well. They're basically distraction fodder. We'll cover those in a bit. However, then you're just going to want to secure a few points, and then get your main ships up the middle, and flank them on each side with a couple of your tankier just cruisers. The cruisers are just there to tank while those middle ships, well, to tank and blink away things, and then these middle ships, they basically devastate anything that uses its shields. The moment their shields go down, those things finish them off. Alright, now that we've taken a few points, we can bring in a little bit more. So we'll grab in another couple of more of those missile boats. Alright, now here normally what I do is I stick a couple of those to guard that one, and I stick a couple of those to guard that one. Then I don't care about the points anymore. We should have enough points to be able to hold this pretty handily. That's it. We just stay there in the middle and let our ships plink away. We want to see what direction they're coming from. Oh yeah, they're coming from the left. In which case we'll sort of rotate our fleet a little bit, and you sort of form a battle line. Oh, no, right there you go. We want to form a battle line and just start shooting away. We don't want to get surrounded. We don't want to get pressured from all sides. We just want to start shooting them a lot. You want to speed this up a bit. Alright, and as you'll see, we'll just start shooting away, and those missiles are what really seals the deal. You see that guy there almost got away. Oh, and... oh, never mind. He made it just out alive. And over here, this ship here is probably incredibly tough, but it's still getting overfluxed by our ships eventually. Alright, we'll let this go on for a bit, and I'll point out the bits that are... well, the enemy seems to have retreated a bunch of its ships, and we're just slowly grinding them into paste, which is fine by me. I think we'll have to adjust our battle line a bit. They seem to be coming more from the front now. There we go. Everyone's going to push forward. How's there? Yeah, we haven't actually lost any ships yet. We're just slowly chipping away. It's the whole point of this feat. Chip, 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 chip. Oh, some ships decided to go around the sides. That's, I don't think that will go well for you. Yeah... Alright, I think we're pretty much done here. For one thing though, I am going to retreat some of our ships. We are going to retreat the two cattle bruisers. They're completely out of gas, as in they've run out of missiles. And while they're retreating, we can bring in some extra ships. Though I think the enemy has decided to... actually, the enemy's decided to run away. Never mind, we'll just run them down. And this is why time speed up is much nicer. Come on, run down that... run it down. This is a common problem, though. A whole bunch of them are treated. I kind of wanted to kill a bunch of you guys. I mean, we don't have to. We already killed this onslaught, so we actually have already claimed the bounty. We don't need to go in and kill the rest of them. I mean, don't need to. The tasty bit is when it's only just carriers left, and you're like, yum, 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 yum. Give me all the carriers. Anyway, with that out of the way, that's how you can destroy the largest bounties in the game using a fleet that's pretty easy to get your hands on and not that expensive. The hardest thing to get there is the Conquest. Now, for the Conquest itself, before progressing, this is how much resources we got out of that fight. We got 600 supplies and a bunch of fuel. It's pretty sweet, to be honest. At the same time, the moment the fight's over, you can scavenge, assess, begin salvage operations, continue, and we gained a whole bunch more resources. So you get a whole bunch of resources, and remember, those salvage ships from the very beginning, they're still going to be really valuable right about now. This is the form of conquest I use. The main things to note are the Skull MLRS and the Hurricane Merv launchers. These two do an enormous amount of damage. Expanded missile racks are a must. Increases the ammo capacity. These things can just keep plinking away for days, and your captain's going to want ballistic mastery. Reason being, not ballistic mastery, sorry, missile specialization. Extra 100% missile ammo capacity. Now that stacks. So, say this missile here starts with 10 ammo. However, expanded missile racks double that to 20, and the captain's ability doubles that again to 40. So these things can just fire pretty much for very extended battles. I forgot to bring that for the last one, actually. But whatever. The only other thing that's a bit odd here is the ion pulsers. I stuck on an ion pulsar here because people used to try and bum rush the ship, and this would just unload in their face. The thing is, its sustained damage is pretty bad, but its burst damage is pretty good. Plus, by the time someone usually gets in range, their shields go down, and this thing's got a bunch of EMP, which usually shuts down all their weapons and makes them ticks with the teeth. After a lot of deaths of these things, I found this thing definitely increased survivability. I ripped out the hypervelocity drivers and put in heavy autocannons. They're more flux efficient and they take down shields quite nicely. However, they suck at killing armor, and that's where the Mjolnir cannons come in. If you want to take umbrage with anything, it would probably be these. These things require 667 flux per second. They are energy intensive. However, they do 533 damage a second to either shields or armor, and it comes in a 400 damage packet. These things, they do work. They're expensive, they cost you an awful lot of flux to fire, but dear lord if they don't do the job well. To really hammer home how good this is, but the rest of this thing is mostly just burst PD laser, and I left one side empty just so we'd have, some flux dissipation, and I built in an augmented drive field so we wouldn't have to carry around oxes. You can rip out the augmented drive field if you don't mind carrying around a couple of ox ships to speed up your fleet, so that will drastically expand your sensor profile and make you more likely to get attacked, and at the same time, it burns up really an awful lot of fuel. But if we go to Intel, there is one mod I installed because I find it very, very useful. Here is combat logs. This is a mod that shows you just what happened in the last combat, giving you a list of damage. For example, this is the Conquest we used last round, and its Molnir cannon actually came out ahead on damage. That's kind of impressive. 75,000 points of damage, 37 to shields, 12,000 to armor, and 25 to hull. That shreds. Normally, though, it's the Squall MLRS that does the most damage. Usually to shields, it's pretty much a shield destroyer. Hurricane Merv usually comes in second and does quite a good job on the hull. For some reason, this ship just did absolute solid work on the last round. I have no idea how. This one ended up way down the list. I think it got walled in a few times and you couldn't get to shoot. But you notice it's Squall, MLRS, the Molnir cannon, all of these things that end up near the top. And then the heavy autocannons come way down. So if you've got a chance to put Molnir cannons on these things, do. They are very, very effective. Any other weapons I tried just do not come close to the amount of damage this thing can output. Yes, it will hurt in terms of the amount of flux, weapon flux you're going to be generating, but you can't argue with the numbers. And before we go on to the more end game fleets, I'd like to check in on one last thing on the colonies, and that is the use of AI cores. For example, this is our mining, and we are chucking out, say, 6 and 6. 6 of each is our production. However, if we assign out an alpha level AI core, one of the better ones, costs 150 grand to sell it, and you can sell them for 150 grand, it increases our output by 1. It also decreases our, reduces the demand this thing has, so it requires less drugs to keep all the miners happy, and at the same time, it reduces the maintenance cost. Adding this in is just an incredible boost to production. There's just one teensy tiny problem. That is the hegemony. They don't like when you do that. The hegemony are in the center of the map, and they own quite a few colonies over this side. They also put down the last 2 AI wars, and if you put in AI cores into your base, you're going to get them doing AI inspections. What that involves is their ships coming along, coming over to your planet, seeing if they have AI cores installed in anything, and if you do, they will rip them out and take them. And they'll also start to hate you more, and probably end up at war with you. Your options are limited. 1, you can bribe them. That will cost you a story point, which will give you no bonus experience, and a bit of money, and that gets more and more expensive every time, and the fleets just keep getting bigger as well. Or you can fight them off, or you can wipe out the hegemony. There's all sorts of things you can do, but if you're going to take on the hegemony, you're probably going to want to farm a lot of AI cores, just so you can really crank up the money. And to do that, you've got to take on, well, the Redacted. Now, this is more spoilers territory, but there are some AI things out here. Let me go find some. Spoilers and all, this is a Remnant fleet. They're horrible. This battleship here will give you nightmares. I hate them so much. Now let's just move into engage using our current fleet, which is, yeah, it's not going to go well. Fine, we'll just do all of that. Oof, this is gonna hurt. Okay, fine. We'll put you 2 over there, and we're going to try our regular grind strategy, but this is not going to work. We have formed an orderly line, but let's just go in here and check some stuff. ECM weapons rating. This determines how much of a range advantage you can get in a battle. Well, it decreases your enemy's range. It's like electronic jamming so that it's harder for their weapons to lock on. If we have 2%, they have 25%, so they've actually got 23% ECM jamming on us. However, it can't go above 10%, so our weapon ranges are reduced by 10%. That's not good, especially considering we're a ranged fleet. In general, they're just... these things are nightmares. You know what? Let me just show you what they do to a fleet of this caliber. And this is a solid fleet. This can take on the largest bounty hunters, can take out pirate bases, star bases, just about anything on its own. And up against these, just going to look like they're getting beaten up. It's going to look like hockey players beating up on a bunch of school kids. All right. Let me deploy the last... Oh, I didn't bring enough frigates. You know what? It wouldn't make a difference. It really wouldn't have done anything. Here comes the smaller stuff. At least the smaller stuff dies easy. Oh, don't get too far out, buddy. You're going to end up getting killed. Isolated and destroyed. And here they come. Oh, let's slow this down a bit. This is going to be depressing. Okay, that ship there is the one you want to watch. It's got a damage output you wouldn't believe. And as you can see, it's picked a target, and it can blink forward. I mean, you can't even get away from it. You can try getting away from it. And look at its flux. It's barely tickled. It just moves in close, and stuff evaporates. And that's blinking forward some more. And look at that. There's a whole bunch of ships just shooting it right in the face. And you know what it says? Oh no, I'm almost overfluxed. You know what I think I'll do? I'll teleport back a few steps. And all my flux dissipates almost instantly. Yeah. Where was it? Oh yes, let's bring in some more fodder for them to destroy. Yeah, like I'm a little bit bitter about this, just for no reason other than I saw those things. These things have just annihilated fleet after fleet of designs I've tried. There is, however, ways to kill them, but let's enjoy watching them work. Oh god, it just evaporates ships. There's nothing you can do for range stuff on this. If this picks a ship, like it has now, it's just gonna demolish that. And there we go. And toasted. Alright then, depressing as that was, let's go to a fleet that can handle it. Say hello to the totally overpowered Luddic Path Brawler. This is a tiny little frigate, and this thing is a package of absolute beautiful destruction. Now there's more than one way to kill the Remnant, but this was the one I found that I liked the most. This thing comes with a built-in accelerated ammo feeder, which means it gets 50% more ballistic damage when it activates that, or it fires 50% faster. Same diff. As well as that, it comes with built-in safety overrides. This is terrifying because it basically increases its combat speed and doubles all its vent fluxing. However, you lose the ability to actively vent, and it makes your combat endurance terrible. So, you know, there's downsides. However, hardened subsystems counteracts that quite a bit. Now, these ones here just come with the built-in safety overrides, solar shielding, and hardened subsystems. The one thing to keep an eye out for, when you get these originally, they're going to have unstable, they're going to be unstable in a way, and you're going to have to do a full restore on them, which costs you 17 grand. So they're a little bit expensive. They're about 27 grand to buy them and then turn them into something that's usable, and that's before you equip the weapons on them. And you're going to need a lot of them. And by a lot, I mean like several pages of them. So this is 5, 10, 15. I have 22 in my fleet, and that's about what I roll with. That leaves me with enough space for 2 cargoes, 2 survey ships. Yeah, these salvage survey ships have been with me a long time at this point. Now, the reason these are so powerful and they actually work is you get to bring more ships to the fight. And this thing punches so far above its weight, it's incredible. It's totally broken. As well as that, it is a closer range ship. This is the assault chain gun. It does 500 damage a second and gets a 200% bonus versus armor. So this does 1,000 damage a second versus armor. It's incredible. These two guns combined do about 500 damage a second versus shields, which is then doubles. That's 1,000 damage a second to shields, 1,000 damage a second to armor, and when it activates its auto-loaders, you can increase that by 50% to 1,500 damage a second for each of them. This thing shreds anything it gets close to. The single ion cannon there is basically to provide EMP. The moment a ship's shields go down, it starts getting EMP'd and quickly falls. These things are terrifying. And, oh, before we go into the custom-built captains, let's go into character views. There are more than one way to play this game. You can go down the entire combat route yourself, and you will be the person dragging the fleet around, and you will be doing most of the damage. Or you can go, the way I went was with leadership role and with a bit of industry. This meant I didn't really have to change anything too much, and I kind of just liked the playstyle. But you definitely can play this entirely differently where you're doing the captaining. I just preferred this method. It felt more like a strategy game. However, there's a few bonuses here. Plus 4% weapon damage for combat ships, coordinated maneuvers, plus 6% to the nav rating of a fleet for deployed frigates. For every frigate I have deployed, I get a plus 6% movement bonus. That stacks up to about 20%, meaning for all the frigates we're putting out, we're going to be getting a plus 20% movement bonus for all our ships. That's huge. Wolfpack tactics mean all frigates with captains, as in any of those brawlers with a captain in it, gets a 20% damage bonus to ships larger than frigates. So if they're shooting something that's not a frigate, is bigger than a frigate, so destroyers, cruisers, or capital ships, they get a 20% damage bonus straight up. That is absolutely nuts. So, did I just go over, say, one of our ships here? I think this one is, yeah, perfect. They're going to get a helmsmanship bonus, so more maneuverability. Plus 60 seconds to peak operating time because of combat endurance and bonus to combat readiness. Target analysis gives them a 10% bonus to destroyers, 50% to cruisers, blah, blah, blah. That's on top of, remember, the 20% getting to anything larger than a frigate. 10% bonus from ballistics, increased charges on their ammo feeder, and as well as that gunnery implants. Now, the gunnery implants, the only reason I put these in here was so I could make it elite. and it gives a plus 4% ECM rating to the fleet when piloted, meaning we can actually out ECCM the Remnant. Was this necessary? No, we're fighting with knives. We do not need to do that. I just wanted to do it because I hated them so much. I just wanted to style them just a little bit. So you can rip those out if you want. It's not really necessary for these ships. All right, so this is the exact same type of fleet. This is actually a small Remnant fleet. It's only got one of those giant battleships in it. Normally they have two, which makes them absolutely... Oh, wow, there's one with three. That is very painful. However, our fleet consists of quite a lot of little brawlers that are overcharged. Let's just wander in here and show you how it works. Because we have a whole bunch of captains, we've actually got even a little bit of deployment points. Normally you're limited to 120, plus this enemy is pretty weak. And we're going to manage to deploy one of these Odyssey battle cruisers. We'll go more into them after the fight. And now we want to immediately go in here and claim these buoy points. The reason being, we don't have a lot of command points, and we want to get in the last of our ships so we can get even more critical damage. And as you'll notice, we have a lot of ships, like just an absolutely gargantuan amount. That's sort of the joy of this. You actually outnumber the enemy, which makes it possible for you to surround them and attack them from multiple directions. And it makes them hard for them to retreat, as in blink back and get away and vent all their flux. If you constantly stay on top of them, you actually have a chance to do some more damage. Well, the enemy is here. Let's start it up, shall we? Now, this is the important bit. These ships have a sense of self-preservation. They don't want to die. That's, a very reasonable thing. However, they do outnumber the enemy quite a bit, and what'll happen is they'll try to look for openings, but they'll see multiple ships and they won't want to dive too deep. They have very short weapons ranges, and they'll want to come in range of 4 enemy ships because that means they might get in trouble and die. So what you're going to want to do, and this is a terrible thing, full assault. This is normally used at the end of a battle when you're running down a fleeing enemy. It clears all their orders and tells them, murder everything. And then that's what they do. This gets rid of their risk-reward calculations, and they just sort of dive in. So at this point, they're just going to dogpile. Also, this battlecruiser was reconfigured to be a little bit more survivable. Now you'll notice this thing over here, it's still incredibly dangerous. It can still kill incredibly quickly, but it's in a target-rich environment. Its main power is when it focuses something. When it focuses on a single target, it destroys it horrifically. However, when it's surrounded on all sides, it's really difficult for it to choose a target to kill. Oh, was it? I forgot to bring the settle battlecruiser. You know what? It doesn't matter. I think we've got this one. There's not really... This was one of those smaller groups anyway. So this excess amount of ships, and you'll notice there's little EMP arcs that go off on it every so often. That is the EMP cannons on the Brawlers doing their job. It takes them a while to chew through it, but once they're through the shields, this thing just starts to glow all the way around. Ah, so delicious. Please observe the battlecruiser in the background. It's wiping out fighters quite handily. It's sort of its main purpose. My god, I love the way they're just running away. They're fleeing as fast as they can, but we keep running them down. Combat readiness is decreasing on our ships, but it won't really matter. Most fights don't last that long. In fact, normally I would just zoom out and speed up time to let them go and get all their killing done. And that is how you kill the Remnant. It suddenly turns out it's really easy when you've got a whole... Well, when you become a little bit less concerned about the lives of your crews. You see, there's 4 different ship types. Frigates, destroyers, cruisers, and capital ships. And we tend to try and make fleet compositions where nothing dies, where everything is perfection. But that perfection comes at a cost. Efficiency. Putting in just swarms of brawlers tends to just annihilate everything. You outnumber the enemy, their damage is incredible, they're quite robust, they're flexible, they're fast. They do amazing damage. We had no losses. Yep. 0 losses from killing a Remnant fleet of that magnitude. And we got ourselves an Alpha Core, which is the whole reason you go around killing those things. A few extra bits to make this more efficient. You're going to have a lot of ships that won't have captains. You won't be able to put captains in all of them. And that's going to result in some problems. Unless you grab this skill at the end, Support Doctrine. Basically, it gives all the ships without officers non-elite helmsmanship, damage control, and combat endurance. The combat endurance there is the important bit. It gives them a plus 60% to peak operating time and gives them a plus 15% to their maximum combat readiness. Now, that may not seem like a big deal, but not just for the extra operational time. That's quite useful, but also it's the combat readiness. You see, you can actually test it here by dropping this down. If we put this down to, say, 75%, you'll notice top speed is now 162 and shield flux damage is 0.79. And as we raise that up, you'll notice that our top speed becomes faster, but also the amount of damage we take per hit on our shield goes up. Having your combat readiness maxed out increases your top speed and increases the amount of damage it takes to do damage to your shields, or, well, reduces the amount of damage your shields are going to take. It's quite nice to have combat readiness maxed out. This normally is one of those stats you don't think about too much, but it is very useful. And considering that it only costs us 1 point in here at the end of Support Doctrine, quite powerful. I don't use more than 1 or 2 permanent hull mods, so I was able to get rid of that skill, though you could mush around the skills if you so desire. Now, that brings us to this battle cruiser. This thing is an abomination. It's doing something it's not supposed to do. It's not really designed for the task we've assigned it, but it was the only capital ship that could really do it. The problem is these brawlers can't handle fighters, so we needed something that could keep up with the brawlers, not get swatted if it ran into the enemy battlecruiser, and at the same time still do a fair decent amount of damage. And this thing manages to tick all those boxes quite well with just a little bit of tweaking here and there. It has one large missile, Squall MLRS, does lots of damage. It's quite handy and quite useful in a fight, but you'll notice there is a lot of tactical lasers around the outside of this. This thing is covered in them. They have 1,000 range, do 75 damage per second, take 75 flux per second. Quite good. They're just a solid thing. Combined with the integrated targeting unit, they actually get a 60% range bonus. That's 1,600. And you're going to get that range bonus, because remember, your ECM rating is perfection here. We don't even bother with fighter bays. This whole thing's purpose is to keep tight in behind these and just zap fighters like crazy, and if anything gets too close, it blasts them. This is an auto-pulse laser and a high-intensity laser. Now, I tried a whole bunch of different weapons in here, but I eventually settled on these two just because they get damage done. I was really surprised, actually, how good the auto-pulse laser was. This thing will get in quite close to a lot of things, and it tends to destroy them quite nicely. I was shocked. Also, it comes with boost built in, so it has a plasma burn to get it close to enemies. The missiles are unfortunately trash. There's a Harpoon MRM, we have a Sabo SRM, and we have a Breach SRM. I tried putting on 3 different missiles and then linking them together using the weapons groupings, so if it fired one, it would fire all of them. It still gets trash amounts of damage done. The Squall is just so much better. If I could stick on a second large missile, I would prefer that. Anyway, this is how it's configured. Now let's just have a quick look at the intel. This is that current fight we did. Actually, that was too short a fight. Let's go with this one. This one was a much larger fight. There was 3 enemy battlecruisers here, and we took a lot of casualties there. We lost a fair few brawlers. It was a tough fight. And you'll see that this Cattle Bruiser did an enormous amount of damage. The Squall, 76,000 damage. Tactical lasers came in at 41,000 damage. Those tactical lasers are tickle damage, but they just keep going, and they slaughter a lot of fighters. High intensity laser came in quite nice, and the auto pulse laser just behind it. I was shocked by that, considering the power difference and the range difference in those ones. And as you can see, the missiles just, they're bottom tier trash. They just do not come close to any of the other weapons on that ship. Well, the Sabo did pretty okay that round. Then you come down here and you'll see, same thing again, Squall, tactical, high intensity, and auto pulsar, and then the missiles just all trash again. I don't know why. It's just, I can't find any decent mid-range missiles. If you find any decent mid-sized missiles, let me know. One bit I missed when it comes to this ship is its shield flux damage. This thing can absorb an awful lot more damage than a lot of ships with more flux capacity than it, namely because it's got a little bit of a bonus here going on. For example, the Conquest has a 1.26 flux damage. It just cannot take damage. This thing is able to take an awful lot more, which is why we crammed on some hardened shields. Hardened shields reduces the damage by 15%, and the captain themselves also gets field modulation for that extra negative 15% damage. This really helps increase the survivability of this, which means it can actually take a pounding from one of those Remnant battleships and actually survive long enough to just run it away until you can get some more brawlers in to help it out. Remember, this thing's job is not to kill the battleships. Its job is to swat fighters and the smaller ships and not get killed by the battleship at the same time. So to sum all of this up, start your colonies from the funds you make from your early trading and your exploration. Then what you're going to want to do is start doing bounty hunting. Use that bounty hunting to pull in the funds. Like, look at this. This is 200 grand just waiting to get smashed to bits. That's so easy with most of those ships, especially considering you're going to be using the Eradicators and some Conquest. As well as that, you will find some fleets with Conquest in them. When you kill them, there's a good chance you'll be able to reclaim those Conquests. In fact, I would advise you to start with the Atlas Mark IIs. They're basically like light versions of Conquests. And then once you've got a few Atlases in your fleet, use them to take on the Conquest fleets. And once you've got the Conquest, you can take on the rest. Later on, you're going to want to get into the Brawlers, but there's a problem with obtaining them. The only place to get good Brawlers and good Eradicators is over here with the Luddic Church. They only have 4 colonies, so yeah, these 4 places you're going to have to come by and check them quite regularly if you want to get up a decent-sized fleet of Brawlers. Getting the Eradicators much easier. Those ones at least you can find pretty regularly and you don't need nearly as many of them. By having this particular skill, you don't need reinforced bulkheads on all your ships because you'll usually be able to reclaim them anyway. Plus, anything with an S-mod or a captain is far more likely to be reclaimable after a fight if it's destroyed or if it's damaged in combat. Also, the reason I like keeping these skills is it reduces monthly costs, it reduces fuel consumption. It's just generally all around, I really like this set of skills. But if you do want to go the combat route, I would probably keep these skills down here and go combat at the same time. These ones are more about saving money in the late game. You don't have to care about money at all. If we check under here, under our production, we're making about 993 grand a month. We can just do whatever we want. Also, you can do your own custom productions. All of those blueprints you found running around the place, you can build yourself paragons, onslaughts. You can start just churning out whatever you'd like. You can even build Luddic Path Brawlers. 10 grand a piece. And with this much production, you can just churn out 20 of them in a month. It's kind of crazy. You can also build all the weapons you need for them as well here. You've got weapons, fighters, whatever you want. Once you get to this stage of the game, it's pretty much just about playing with all the toys in the toy box. And there's a lot of toys there. And my advice would be play around with all the different fleets and ships. This is just one way of taking care of the Remnant that will at least be fairly easy to do without requiring an awful lot of combat skills. But do try and experiment around. There's an awful lot of fun this game has to offer. Anyway, I'm going to cut this out here before I waffle anymore. I hope you enjoyed and good luck. Yes, a quick tutorial at only 56 minutes. Alright, time for the rapid fire buzzer round. If you ever see the tattooed roughs, go over and see if their contract is up. This can usually net you about 40 experienced marines that will be of very high quality. And that means you get more bang for your buck for using them. Totally worthwhile. If you ever need to buy weapons or ship, talk to the arms dealer about buying illegal weapons. There's normally 2 of these active on the map at any one time. You just have to visit enough bars to find them. They can allow you to produce pretty much any weapons and ships you want. Not everything though. Unfortunately, they don't stock the Luddic Path Brawler. It's unfortunate, but that's one of the few things they don't stock. However, if you want cruisers, they do stock the Eradicator. That is very nice. Unfortunately, it'll cost you 200 grand. There's a 200% markup on this. They also do all weapons and fighters. Help yourself. If you can't find any good bounties, you can go and talk to these people offering bounties, and they can give you ones even if there's none available on the regular map. This can be especially helpful if you need some of the weaker ones and there's only tougher ones showing up. If you ever see the man with the paper book, go over and see what he wants. Sometimes he can offer you things that you cannot obtain any other way, like upgrades for your colonies with combat drone replicators, hyper shunts, all sorts of stuff that wouldn't exist unless he offers it to you. The SP cost doubles every time though you accept those. There's a mission flagged down the academic with the tripod. They'll offer you a location of a cache of weapons and stuff. Keep the alpha core. The only thing it triggers is you might get some pirates attacking you on the way back home. Who cares, it's just pirates. Sometimes you're going to have the Luddic Path or pirates targeting your colonies, and the only way to stop them is to destroy the base that's funding it. In this instance, we destroyed these ones another 29 days before they can kick in, but sometimes it won't tell you where the base is, and how do you find it without searching the entire map, which would be, well, time-consuming and kind of frustrating if you have to do that once a year. Instead, go to the targeted planet, take a shuttle down to visit the dockside bar, and you'll find either a pather or a pirate who'll want to talk to you. Now, do be aware, they won't show up immediately, they'll only show up the first month after the bases start targeting your place, so you might have to wait a week or two. So if you go out and actually talk to them, they'll sell you the location for 10 grand. Bonus fact, you can actually offer for them to join your fleet and they'll become a captain. If you click on the button, it'll tell you, oh, this one's reckless and has gunnery implants. Well, maybe not this one, but it will cost you a story point. However, you do get a captain this way, so it's kind of nice. Anyway, you agree to their terms, leave the bar, and then when you go back out onto the world map, you can see, yep, there it is. It's over there. We'll have to go to, well, a long way away, and we can go destroy that base. If you work up your status with some of the contacts you can cultivate, you can actually get access to some weird missions that you can't normally see. Maybe something to look into. Do you not like getting blinded every time a ship explodes? You can go into that same file where you change the campaign map speed, search for Enable Ship Explosion Whiteout, and change it from true to false. Once you change it to false, no more blinding explosions.